people of LinkedIn. We're just going to double check that we are live. And we'll start our exciting chat.
Yep, I can see it now.
People of LinkedIn. Perfect. All right. All right, welcome everyone. I won't delay any longer. I hope a lot of you will join us today. And if you don't, this will be recorded. Let's see, awesome. All right, I just got confirmation from the team that we are on, and perfect. I am so excited today to be joined by a higher education marketing guru, brand strategist, expert, to all things higher ed. I think a lot of universities and colleges probably rely on his wisdom when it comes to reaching students, messaging, targeting, and everything in between. So thank you so much, Bart, for joining us today, for giving us an hour of your time, possibly maybe a little bit less than an hour. I have a few questions set up for you that we'll cover, but essentially just a chat between the two of us, and hopefully some people will join us on the live feed and add comments and questions for you as well. So with that, can I give you 2 minutes to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, maybe even run us down through the last 8 months and what it's been like.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Maria. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this chat today. I have been in higher ed marketing for a long time now. I started out as a designer, and in 1994, I opened up my mouth and told my boss at the time that I think this internet thing could have some legs. And he told me it was a fad and that I didn't need to worry about that, but he ended up selling a website a few months later. And so I was kind of thrown in the midst of figuring out how to do websites and started doing that way early. And in 97, my alma mater, Anderson University in Indiana, called up and said, hey, we hear you've been doing some websites. We would love to have you help us with a website for our college. We think it's something that students might be interested in, and that might be a way that they can learn about our school. So Anderson was one of the very first schools that did a website in 1997. It got picked up by the Chronicle of Higher Education and U.S. News and World Report. And so we started doing a lot of different websites over the years in the late 90s and through the 2000s, and brands all over the country and North America. And so in 2010, I decided that I wanted to just focus entirely on higher ed. I had been doing websites for RCA and Motorola and all kinds of big corporate brands, as well as different types of marketing, a lot of digital marketing, and just decided I wanted to focus on a higher education and leverage a lot of the experience that I had. And so 2010, 2011 started Caylor Solutions to do that. And so for the last 10 years, I've been focused on education brands and kind of bringing to bear what I've learned over the course of my career in marketing and design and branding, both digital and traditional kind of print, and just trying to play that into the education market. And so, you mentioned the last 8 years. I've been talking for years now for the idea of leveraging digital, doing Google, doing pay-per-click, doing different ways of utilizing social media and email and websites, and everything from virtual tours. I've been talking about that for years. And what happened in March is people started calling and saying, hey, that thing you talked about a few years ago? I think we're ready to do that.
Let's do it now.
So I think a lot of times education, especially, sometimes is a little bit more reluctant to get into maybe what you might see retailers doing, kind of that on the edge type of marketing, whether it's personalization, whether it's differentiation, all kinds of things. But I think that COVID and the situation has kind of forced a lot of education to kind of rethink that and figure out how they can adapt more quickly. And digital marketing is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive a little bit deeper into the last 8 months and how it's changed the entire landscape of higher ed, tell me about a few really exciting projects you were part of over the years, whether it's a complete rebrand, whether it's a new website or new marketing strategy. And if you feel up to it, you can mention the school name. So
well, I think that there's a lot of schools that we've done kind of complete overhauls of their website, and that's always really pleasing. That when a school is drowning in 8,000-9,000 pages of content that they just don't know was there, what's going on, to be able to kind of sort through that, give them a navigation that really makes sense for the prospective students, makes it easy for the students to get around, and then be able to reorganize that into 500, 600, 800 pages of really good content that's going to be of value for the prospective students and the faculty and staff. That's always something that we really enjoy. We do that a lot. I also really enjoy being able to help a school and kind of start with maybe a website that then kind of produces a little bit of a branding, because we really do a branding study when we do any type of website work, and then being able to then take that and then apply that into their other parts of their Conflow for the enrollment, or maybe being able to take that over to their development and advancement office to really kind of be able to how they can better raise capital and raise different campaigns based on that new way of kind of talking about themselves and really being able to differentiate themselves. So I'm always happy with that. And I'm really a creature of I'm a constant learner. And so I will, scour LinkedIn and different places just all the time, trying to come up and see what new tools and tactics and what different people are doing. I mean, it's how I discovered Unibuddy, was just trying to figure out new ways that people are doing things that are creative and unique, utilizing technology or utilizing different ways of leveraging content. And so I'm always really excited when I can bring those types of things to my clients and see the impact that it makes for them to be able to say, hey, we could do a virtual campus tour if we had this camera that we bought on Amazon for $300 and
That's right.
Google Maps, and being able to do that. And so being able to show people how to do that, whether it's through webinars like this or live broadcasts or even just in-person professional development seminars that I do. It's always rewarding to see kind of the light bulbs go off and somebody do it, and then to start to see the results that really make an impact on the enrollment.
Yeah. And there is this sense, I think in higher ed, there is this culture of, well, that university is doing that and it looks like it's working well, so let's try it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Do you see that also across your clientele?
And I think that happens all the time. And I think sometimes, though, schools are a little reluctant to do that. But in reality, I think that if you can identify the differentiator of what your school's about and live in that brand, you're not really competing against other people. You're really just trying to help people, self-identify with what you are and what you have to offer. And so it removes the competition, because, I mean, if you think that one student is just going to, it's not, we have to think outside of commodity. That's so if we see our schools as just a commodity, that, okay, well, we're a small school or we're a large school and this is what we offer. And well, you're going to compete against commodity. But if you really try to differentiate yourself and say, you know what, we do this better than anybody else does, and we're going to demonstrate that. And it could be kind of what some people might call a long tail keyword or a long tail element.
Right.
You only have to find, a few hundred people to fill your class for a small school, or, a few thousand. And, think of the millions of people that are out there. You just have to get that differentiator and that messaging out there. And that's the key, is really getting in front and being able to be discovered by the people that are looking for you, the people that would self-identify. Maybe it's a mission fit that a lot of schools call. Yeah. If you can find those students and self-identify with those students, the rest is pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Can I jump into some of the questions that I had for you? Okay, perfect. And thank you for that. That was a nice overview. So what have you seen in terms of trends, a few trending pivots in higher ed marketing since March?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm seeing, obviously out of necessity, is this idea of turning a lot of what used to be physical into virtual. So whether it's tours, campus tours, whether it's events, I've seen homecomings have to go virtual. I've seen, campus tours or campus visits. Those all have to go virtual. Even registration, last spring when you would do registration, and even some of the orientation. I know my son is a freshman at Purdue University this year, and
wow, that's amazing.
A lot of his entire orientation was virtual, and so he had to go through and complete several things, online in a portal. So much of what we always took for granted that could just happen, on the ground, has had to become virtualized. And so, the go-to obviously is Zoom, and everybody is kind of trying to figure out how to leverage Zoom in different ways and different means. But I think that sometimes when you can differentiate yourself a little bit and you can kind of do things a little bit differently, even within Zoom, I think that's where things start to change and people start to take notice. And so I think the risk is right now, even though everybody's having to virtualize everything, how can we still do it on our style? Your school has a style and a voice. How can you do it the way your school does it? And so virtualization is a big thing. I think another thing that I'm seeing a lot more is a lot more digital paid marketing. So whether it's Google pay-per-click or Facebook and Instagram ads, we see a lot more people trying to adopt the idea of being there when people are searching. And so I see a lot more of that happening than I did before. And then I also see a lot of schools are coming to us and saying, hey, we really feel like now with COVID, and now that maybe we can't get people on campus, there's some other challenges. We feel like we really need to clarify that messaging, kind of what I've been talking about with the idea of what makes you different. What is that brand story? What do people need to, get when they see you and see your website? And there's so many times that I think we forget that there's only one chance to make a good impression. Yeah. And so right now, a lot more people are relying on any emails they're seeing, their website, relying on what they see on social media. So that virtual world has become all the more intensified in the importance since March, because it's all that we have to rely on. It used to be, well, if they got to the website and it wasn't quite there, at least when we get them on campus, we know we can sell them. Right. A lot of times you can't do that now. You can't guarantee that. And so I see a lot of schools just trying to figure out how they can better represent themselves in that virtual digital space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you think email is still a top channel in terms of marketing and communications when it comes to reaching students?
I think that it has its place. I mean, I think that I hear a lot of people say, well, nobody answers email. Well, when they get 300, I mean, I've got kids that are going to college. I've got 2 in high school and 2 in college already. So I've experienced what it's like. And I'll tell you that the schools that just use email and they just plug in the same thing as everybody else. I mean, I look at my kids' inboxes and they're just, hundreds and hundreds of messages a day that have their name in the email, and they try to do all the tricks to get them to open it with emojis and everything. Right. There's a challenge to that. But I will tell you that my oldest son, he's a junior at Butler University here in Indiana. And the difference that it made for him was that Butler was one of 7 schools he was looking at, and it was probably at the bottom of the list. But the thing that they did that was different than anybody else is they did personalization, and they did proper email marketing, which included Mom and I on the emails. And so after he was accepted, every email that went out included Mom and I. And so he was not looking at his email, but Mom and I were only getting emails from Butler University. None of the other schools were sending us emails. Right. And so we would talk about Butler at evening and say, hey, did you see there's a visit day coming up? Did you see this? And the second thing they did is on the Common App, they included a couple questions. And 2 of the questions were, do you have any pets? And if so, what are their names? And so he just put in, I have a dog, his name's Tigger, and I have a cat named Stormy. Well, in February, after he was accepted, he got 2 letters in the mail. It wasn't for him. It was one addressed to Tigger Caylor and one addressed to Stormy Caylor. Oh, wow. And it came from Blue the Bulldog, the of Butler. And it basically was written from a point of view of a dog that said, hey, Tigger, you're a dog, I'm a dog. I've heard your human's been accepted. I will protect him as if it was my own when he's here on campus. And it came with a little bandana for each of the pets, and the one to the cat was written in a different way. It was like, I'm a dog, you're a cat. I respect that. I know we don't always see eye to eye on things, but and it was just brilliantly written. It had the bandanas, and it hit him in a personalized way because they had asked about something that was personal to him. His pets were very important to him. They reached out and they touched him in that place with personalization. They added their brand, their clarity of messaging, their personalization, their humor. And I really believe that day was the day he decided to go to Butler University. And he never regretted it. And so I think that schools that can tap into that personalization, the clarity of the brand messaging, and really trying to do things a little different, even though you might be using the same channels. I mean, he received direct mail from everybody.
Yeah.
But the direct mail wasn't aimed at his pets. So it's just a slight twist that I think a lot of times makes a big difference. And that's one of the things I like about your platform, is just the idea of leveraging other students to engage with prospective students. I think that's just another twist on, hey, it's not the admissions counselors, it's students. And so I think twists like that really make a big difference.
Right. Yeah. And there is a lot to say about that sentiment part of reaching the student, right? With emotions and understanding exactly what's going to trigger. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, whether we're at the grocery store trying to pick a box of pasta or looking for the next adventure in higher ed, it's a lot of emotion that is involved in that. So that's amazing. If you can share a screenshot of those letters with us later, that would be amazing. Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. All right. Well, so let's talk about personalization a little bit more, since we're on that. How much do you think schools are already doing that in terms of the extra research it takes, right, to understand exactly the persona? I'm going to use a marketing buzzword, but every student fits a particular persona profile, right? So how much have you seen your clients do that? Take the extra step to really research, maybe put their students in a particular category persona, and then create messaging exactly for each of those segments.
Yeah, I really think that's one of the areas that is kind of prime for taking. I don't see a lot of schools doing that, and we're getting ready to work with a school to actually do that now. And it's going to take some work. I mean, certainly if you're working at a search campaign level, we're at the very top where you're buying 80,000 names from ACT or someone else, it's more difficult. Right. You can do a little bit because you might know that they're interested in the sciences, or you might know a few other things that are a little bit broader. They're not going to be as personalized as what you might be able to do later on. But I think that you can still do some of that even in your initial campaigns. Certainly I think the typical way that I see people doing it is, your name goes in here and just insert name or different things. You have to do that in a natural way. How many emails do you get in a day where they use your name in the subject line from a friend? Not very many. And so we've got to kind of think through what's natural and what's not going to seem kind of creepy or weird in the way that we personalize. And I think that sometimes, though, as they get further down on the funnel, you can start to ask more questions. You can start to understand them better because there's context. And so, when you've got your admissions counselor talking with them or texting with them or sending them a birthday greeting or even just paying attention to, let's say you've got you're a small school and you've got, you're an admissions counselor that's working 100 different leads and your goal is to land, 50 students. Well, if you're working 100 or 200 different leads, you can spend some time and get to know the students, whether it's through social media, whether it's just through some vanity searches on Google. A lot of times when I'm either meeting new people or I'm engaging with people, I'll do a quick search on Google just to understand more about who they are. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's pretty typical. And I feel like that adds a level that I understand the people that I'm talking to a little bit better. Yeah. I also recognize how I might be able to serve them better. Right. And so being able to do that, I think that once they get to a certain point in the funnel, then I think it's a matter of once you understand them, you've built a relationship. That's when I think that when you're at the application and the admit stage, I mean, a lot of schools forget that the sale doesn't end at the admit. There's a whole nother sales cycle that happens when you go from admit to deposit, and then even from deposit to matriculation. Yeah. You're constantly having to reset that selling motion. Right. And I think that the more personalized you can get, the tighter down the funnel, the more relevant you are, and the more trusted you are.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that even when you start to send out materials, like I would suggest that get to know them even in the application, get to know a little bit more personalization in your questions. Yeah. Well, then when you send out your welcome packs, you could actually send out a welcome pack that had photos of different activities on campus that they're interested in. Yeah. And it's not as overt as saying, we know you're interested in volleyball, but you're just showing volleyball shots.
Right.
And because you know that that's something they're interested in, and they maybe they won the cross country, state championship. Well, and they're going to run cross country. Well, you've got different photos of athletics and cross country and things like that. So I think that personalization is more than just names. It can be, different photos. And there's a printer that we're working with called Think Patented out of Dayton, Ohio, and they just invested in a new press that's I think the second in the United States. It's a big HP, huge monster press, but it works the same way as your desktop press. Okay. And so they can actually run it so that every piece, if I do a view book, I can make every photo unique to the person that's going to get the view book.
Wow, that's
cool. So the idea that I could create a completely customized, personalized view book for every student that looks like it's the same view book for everybody, but it's just got those hints of different photos, different ways of presenting the information, what I lead with. I can readjust everything knowing what I know about that student. And I think that type of thing, it's subtle, but I think students are going to gravitate toward things that feel like them rather than just feel like everybody. And the technology is there that we can actually start to do that. And I think that's where personalization and customization and understanding your differentiation can come in ways that we've never been able to do before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've seen some really fun ways some of our customers are using Unibuddy in terms of understanding exactly what the student sentiment is and making sure that it drives their marketing strategy and their messaging and their tone through the conversational insights that they have access to through the Unibuddy platform. They can see, most talked about topics in between, prospective students and ambassadors. They can see region. They can see if their, international students are more concerned about hearing about employability right after graduation, or for instance, for some universities, they could see that students are more concerned about hearing about diversity and what the university is doing to make sure there is a diverse student body. So that's really, really important in terms of nailing that personalization strategy. And then, of course, you have data entry, proper data segmentation, right?
You've got to manage all that data. And I think that's one of the challenges. A lot of times schools don't recognize the amount of vast data they might even have, even at the level of the admissions counselor. But being able to organize that and get it in a place that you can actually use it, that's a big challenge. But I think that if you're willing to do the work, the payoff could be huge. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so what about, we already talked about differentiation and personalization. That's amazing. What about budgets? So we all know last 8 months has been challenging in more ways than I can actually list today, especially for the higher ed community. Yes, so we have a message from Nilsana. She said that personalized welcome packs is a very interesting strategy. Yeah, and it sounds like a fun project too. I feel like you can just imagine the smiles on the students' faces when they open the package that you're actually packing. I love that. That's amazing. Yeah. So about budgets, I think many teams have experienced, furloughs and layoffs for the actual team, but then also at the same time experience budget cuts across marketing. Sometimes that's the first thing that goes, right? You could correct me if I'm wrong in terms of higher ed, but yeah, what are some innovative ways higher ed professionals, universities could still reach prospective students on quote unquote a bootstrap budget?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I actually have for several years have done presentations, and I recently turned it into an ebook on my website called Marketing on a Shoestring Budget. I work with a lot of really tiny schools. A couple of the schools that I have only 50 students total in the school, and so they're always looking for ways to how can we do more with less. And one of the keys in that is developing content. Right. And being able to really develop what I call evergreen content. So it's content that whether you publish it today or you do it or you republish it in a year or 2 years, it's still viable, it's still relevant. And I think the key to content is figuring out what are the questions that your students, prospective students have, and answering those questions for them. And so there's a great book by a guy by the name of Jay Baer that he wrote a few years ago called Utility. And the idea that you personally or your brand needs to be useful and needs to serve everyone else rather than just promoting yourself. One of the quotes in the book is, success comes to those brands that educate and inform and not those who promote. And so if you can figure out what are the questions that your prospective students have, and you can answer those and answer those with authority and with differentiation, with clarity, you're going to build a great deal of trust, and you're going to also do it with emotion in different methods. And so one of the things I always encourage my admissions departments to do is to, hey, let's, spend a lunch hour, let's say on a Wednesday, grab some pizzas. We're going to sit around. We're going to have the entire admissions team sit around, and we're going to write down the top 50 questions that students ask us about our school. And that probably will take you about 20 minutes to do that. And then your goal then is to flip that around and saying, okay, 50 questions is one question per week for the next year. We've just developed a blog editorial calendar, and we're going to write an answer to each of those questions in a 500 to 750 word blog entry. We're going to do a little bit of keyword research, whether we use Google or some other keywords on SEMrush or whatever. And we're going to figure out what keywords are associated with that question. And then we're going to write those blog posts. We're going to start publishing those, and we're going to make those discoverable so that when people go to Google, which is where they go to get the answers to the questions that they're asking, when they type in what's the difference between private and public schools, your answer is going to come up in the top 1, 2, or 3. They're going to click on that. They're going to read about that answer, and then they're going to see how that applies specifically to your school. And there's going to be a nice call to action at the bottom to either download an ebook or, take a quiz or do something that you can gain their email and some contact information to start personalizing messaging to them so that you can engage further with them and start driving them down the funnel. I think that content allows you to do that, because once you write that blog post, you can then turn that blog post into, let's say you have 10 blog posts, you turn it into an ebook. Let's say that you then take that blog post and you take those questions and then you do a live chat like this and you turn it into a podcast, you turn it into a webinar or a broadcast. You can then transcribe that and turn that into an email series of 10 emails that they could subscribe to. So there's just so many ways that once you have that content, you can then leverage that content and recycle it and repurpose it and syndicate it, not only on your website, but let's say that you're a school that's affiliated with a church or another organization, denomination. You could share it with their institution, their area. Maybe it's with your Chamber of Commerce. If you're local, you start syndicating this content so that it starts to gain some momentum. And so you're being found on Google, you're being found on LinkedIn and Instagram. You're using hashtags on Instagram and Facebook and places to be discoverable. And so the idea that you really want all these different ways of content to drive people to your website, drive people to your calls to action. And you want to do that in a way that is basically answering the question. So when they're asking the question, you are first in line to give them the answer.
Absolutely. And I think some might argue that, content is great, but it is more of a long-term strategy. We need students yesterday. How can we, fill that top of the funnel? And I think you already answered this follow-up question. And it's really just by syndicating backlinks, a little bit of extra keyword research, right? Affiliations, influencers. So there is a little bit of a growth hacking that needs to be done there, right? In order for that content to work for you just a little bit faster than the usual organic content strategy, right? That's
exactly right. And I think that a lot of times when I hear people say, well, we need students yesterday, well, the problem is you're going to need students in 6 months. So let's go ahead and do the content and be ready for 6 months while we're figuring out how to get students yesterday. Let's not make it one or the other. Let's do both. I mean, if you want strategies on how to get students yesterday, we can put some strategies together. We can identify where are those watering holes the students are right now, and let's go engage with them in those watering holes, whether those are, whether those watering holes are, local places that they're hanging out, whether it's boys and girls clubs, whether it's youth groups, whether it's, different places that we want to do some creative advertising in malls or things like that. We've got to figure out where they're at right now. Quite frankly, right now, where they're at is Zoom, at home, and on YouTube. So let's start doing YouTube ads. Let's do bumper ads on the videos they're watching. And that's probably the cheapest way you can do pay-per-click right now is video ads on YouTube. And a lot of people aren't doing that.
You beat me to it, because that was going to be my next question, to say, okay, let's say there is a little bit of budget, right? And content is long-term. We want short-term, students now. let's say I have a little bit of budget, where would you invest that in terms of digital paid? And you just answered that, YouTube. I know TikTok has been, in the talks for a while now as that one of the top channels. Do you agree, disagree, or do you still think YouTube is the go-to place for people on a bootstrap budget?
I think YouTube is the go-to place. I mean, it's pennies on the dollar to get in front of people, and you're going to be in front of them where they're already wanting to be. One of the challenges with like Instagram is that I can put hashtags out, I can put my content out there, but unless TikTok or Instagram is very entertaining, your content has to be entertaining to be in those places. It's going to be difficult to get the attention of students.
Sure.
Certainly. The TikTok with the Fleetwood Mac Dreams and Ocean Spray and all that recent thing. I mean, that was entertaining, but it was also just spur of the moment. It was viral. You can't do that. I mean, you can't plan that.
Yeah.
And so, but I have seen schools that are doing TikTok well, but they're doing it in an entertaining way. And honestly, I think that if you're able to do it in an entertaining way, you're already doing a lot of things really well. If you're a student that's looking for students if you're a school looking for students yesterday, I would not recommend going to TikTok. I wouldn't recommend, putting all your eggs in the Instagram basket. I'd probably say do some pay-per-click ads around the questions people are asking. Do Google searches and do, YouTube, because they're going to be watching videos. They're going to be looking for either the answers, or they're just going to be looking for videos that they want to watch. Figure out what your particular audience is watching on YouTube. Ask some current students and say, hey, what YouTubers does everybody follow around here? What our type of school, what do they follow? And start putting ads at the beginning of those videos, and make them creative, unique, and short 15-second videos that answers the questions that students have. I think that's where I'd put my money in if I needed students today.
And that makes all the sense in the world when you say ask your students what they're watching, because essentially your prospective student is your current student, right? So if you really want to get to know your perfect fit buyer, it is already your current student. And so the more you understand their behavior and their engagement and their preferences, then you can do your targeting strategy that way. And that makes sense.
That's why I ask my kids a lot of times what they're doing, what they're watching. I mean, I'm a 50-year-old, guy that is doing a business, but I have thoughts and I have direction, but when it comes down to it, I'm going to rely on market research, and that's a lot of times asking the students and what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you have an unfair advantage. I feel like you have a focus group that you own to yourself.
I do, and I'm going to leverage that as long as I can.
That's awesome. All right. So what about meeting students digitally? And I think you might have touched on this in the beginning. But what is that new go-to methodology? And do you think it's, the change is here and we know it. And we know that digital is here to stay somehow, right? For the foreseeable future, no matter what our world ends up being like in 2021. But do you agree that it's going to stay? Do you agree that 2021 is going to be very much like this year in terms of the new channel is digital and that's the place to be?
I think that I think we're going to get back to some semblance of something, but I don't think it's going to be what we had before. Certainly campus visits are going to eventually happen again. People are going to want to get back to something that they've known before. So I definitely think that we're going to go back to some of those things. But I think that the smartest marketers are going to be those who say, okay, people are back on campus now. We're not going to go back to campus visits as they were before. We're going to do campus visits in person, but we're going to have a digital twist with it.
Yeah.
So that might be using your phones, and maybe there's wayfinding or something on campus that as they approach buildings, there's a QR code that they can watch a video of a professor speaking inside that building, or they can, so there's going to have to be this overlay of what we're learning this year. And then as we go back to what we knew before and overlaying that, kind of like what I talked about with the view books or the printed pieces. Right. Yes, they are physical, but let's put a digital layer on top of them. And I think the most successful marketers are going to use all the tools at their disposal and kind of put them together in a new way that's going to be different, that's going to be unique, and it's in some ways entertaining, so that students feel more empowered. I mean, Gen Z wants to kind of have a little bit more control over their world.
Right.
I think they want to engage with it differently than millennials or Xers or different folks. And so we've got to give them those options that, when they are on that campus tour, how can they leverage their phone to kind of augment that reality? And whether it is truly augmented reality is one way to do it.
Yeah.
Or there's other ways. I mean, there's a company out of New Zealand that I've been following that I've kind of done a few little things with that. Imagine if you're in when we get back to doing school fairs, the idea of a college fair, if you could have a Snapchat icon or a QR code or something that somebody could click on, and all of a sudden they can be on your campus virtually by walking through this little door. And so I did a little version of that with a campus where we actually used a 360-degree photo of a chapel that they had, but the idea that they could click on it and I could actually walk through that door virtually and experience that, look all around through the lens of my phone. It's things like that that are going to add to the experience and the emotion of a campus tour, of a college fair, of different ways that are going to augment the conversation around that and give your admissions counselors tools to be able to take the student there and let them imagine themselves in that place. Because I think that's what's going to be critical, is that these prospective students can see themselves there. And when they see themselves there and they picture that in their mind, that helps them make the decisions.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I like the way you sort of defined that extra digital layer, and I think it's going to also be one of those safety nets, right, for 2021. So just in case this doesn't work, we have that safety net of that extra digital layer, so we can still get our engagement, we can still reach the students, answer their questions, and so on. That's awesome.
Right.
We have a question. So from Lisana, I'm in Botswana and access to internet is not as easy as it is in Europe. So what's the best way to tackle meeting or reaching prospects who may have challenges in accessing internet? So yeah, that's actually a really good question.
It's a great question. I've got some clients that are that serve Native Alaskans, and they run into the same type of thing because a lot of the remote villages in Alaska are very much like Botswana, and there's internet's limited. And so some of the things that we've done for that particular client is that on the mobile version of their website, we've stripped it way down so that it's easier to access on a phone, because they're using a phone and doing things like that. I think also in those types of situations, it's more important to figure out kind of that word of mouth type of marketing. So what are the things that you can do that might be shared or shareable? And so whether it's a text or whether it's something on WhatsApp, trying to figure out ways to leverage the tools that you have, that your prospective students have, and so I would probably look at it. I just proofed a blog post for next week's article that we have at Caylor Solutions, and it's on how to leverage WhatsApp. And the bent is a little bit more for schools in the States that are looking to maybe recruit first generation multicultural students. So, one of the fastest growing populations here in the United States over the next several years is going to be the Hispanic student. And many Hispanic students come from multicultural families, and the decision making in those families are often different. And if they have ties into Central America, many times they're using WhatsApp. Mexico is one of the largest users of WhatsApp. So if you can kind of figure out a strategy utilizing WhatsApp for those particular students, that helps them understand that you understand their situation. It personalizes it. It gives you a clarity of messaging. But I would look at ways that you can leverage something like WhatsApp, something that your students are already using that you can be discovered in, and how you might be able to do that with word of mouth, with WhatsApp, with maybe events, with with being able to go into different areas where their watering holes are. Because even in Botswana, students and prospective students are still hanging out at different places. How can you insert yourself into those places, whether it's at their current schools, the primary schools, or if there are other areas? I would just try to figure out how can you get in the mind of that student, and where would it make sense for you to be?
Yeah. And this is actually, and thank you, Nosana, for that question. It's a perfect segue for my next question. And I am mindful of time. We are about 15 minutes away. So I did want to address at least the international student and international recruitment end of things. It's been up and down, right? I think it's had its challenges as well, not only from like travel restrictions, but also from policy changes, immigration laws, and just the uncertainty that went across all international students, whether they were already here, right, not understanding what their future is going to be, or the ones that were set to come in and had to change their plans, at least for now. What do you think 2021 is going to be like for international students coming to the U.S. to study?
I think that once COVID settles down, I think there'll be some opening for that. I also think that the change in administration will certainly be a lot more friendly to that, and I think that you'll see some things change about that. I think that those types of things are going to change, and I think that you're going to see the coasts be very open to that. And I think that higher education in general will be very open to that. But I think that sometimes what you're going to find is that if you're a school in a rural area or in the central states, one of your challenges is going to be to assure those international students that it will be safe to be here, and assure their parents that it will be safe to be here. I mean, the world is watching the United States, and there's a lot of craziness that's going on that gets sensationalized sometimes in the media. I mean, I'm here in central Indiana, and I've got a lot of schools in the Midwest that I work with. Those are very safe places for international students, and the cities that they're in are very safe places for international students. But I think that I think that schools, it needs to be a burden on them to communicate that and do that with clarity, with testimonials, with social proof, in that, so that those students feel safe coming there. Yeah. And I think that's going to be more of the challenge, is overcoming that fear rather than the actual, restrictions still being in place. I think we're at the next level of, okay, everything's opening back up, but how can we assure students and parents that it's going to be okay?
Yeah, and safe and welcoming too, because you want to make sure that you're going to be accepted in your new community as an international student, no matter your race, religion, and corner of the world that you come from. And so, and you're right, the burden is on the schools to make sure that they communicate that. And I think maybe the best tool to communicate that particular message is through current student ambassadors, right? Ambassadors just like these international students coming in, where they can talk to someone either from same, continent, South America, or maybe same exact country, if that's possible. And that is as personalized as it can be in terms of testimonial, right? Where there is this trust. And yes, I vouch for the school. I've been, studying here for a few years. I'm welcomed. I've made friends. I love the professors, love the food. I don't know.
Exactly.
Thing that they can share, right? To create that little bit of reassurance.
Right.
That's awesome.
Very good.
Cool. Let's see. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us? Anything else you wanted to mention as part of this chat? I think maybe there's one thing that I wanted to make sure we cover before we log off is the issue of diversity. Whether it's diversity in marketing, diversity in messaging, or ensuring that your messaging is inclusive so it can actually bring in diversity into the student body. So if you don't mind, if you can touch on that just a little bit, and then the floor is yours if you wanted to add anything.
Sure. I do think that being authentic and being yourself is one of the biggest things that you can do to build diversity and build up, that goal that everyone has. And I think that you also have to, and when I say authentic, I mean that it also has to be, it's who you are in all aspects of who you are. I recently was talking to a school about diversity, and they were talking about that in their marketing. And I said, well, that's great, but when I go to your faculty page, I don't see diversity. I don't see diversity in your administration. If you really want to do diversity, it can't be through marketing. It has to be through who you are as a community. And it's only when you change that perspective of the community, then we can talk about marketing, and then we can talk about ways to draw that in. But if I'm just putting pictures in there to put diversity in, but that's not what they're going to experience on campus, then we shouldn't do it. If we really want diversity, which is what I think you want, and I think most schools want, that is going to have to start with a different level than marketing. It's going to have to start with the way that hiring is done. It's going to have to start with the way that participation is done, the way that community is done, and the way that you engage with the community around you. I work with a lot of faith-based schools, and we talk about diversity, and we talk about those types of things, not because it's a checkbox, but because it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we want to spend a lot of time kind of talking about that and living that out before we start marketing it. And so I think that while diversity is kind of a hot topic right now, I think it has to start at a deeper level than just a piece of marketing.
That's true. You're right. I mean, I think when I think diversity, I immediately think student body diversity. But you're absolutely right. There is a much deeper level in that, in making sure faculty is diverse. Staff, admins, everyone really across all teams and units within the university need to show that type of diversity, and that is super important. You're right. All right. Well, this has been so fun. I want to give you the last few minutes all to yourself. Maybe tell us about where our viewers and our network can find some of the amazing content that you're publishing. If you have any upcoming events or webinars that you'd like to talk about, and let us know when they're happening.
Okay. Well, I will just encourage everyone to go to Caylor-solutions.com. That is our website, and we've been doing a weekly blog for about 6 years. And that blog, we started it the same way, that just with the idea that we started with the idea of what are the questions that our prospective clients have. And so a lot of questions around, enrollment marketing, advancement marketing, capital campaigns. So we spend a lot of time publishing articles that answer those questions. And so that would be a great place to start. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter and have those emailed to you weekly. You can follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn at Bart Caylor. And I think that you'll find there, if you follow me there, you're going to not only see a lot of those articles that we publish, but you also see we do a lot of curated content. And so I've got a team of people that just spend time kind of going through all these different aspects of articles, and we use Feedly, and we just kind of take in all the higher education news and marketing news and publish that probably 3 or 4 times a day on LinkedIn, just sharing curated content that we found. And then that weekly newsletter, we kind of summarize the best of what we've been reading, what our blog posts are, some resources that we've found, whether it's like Unibuddy or Accessibee or different new tools that we've discovered. And then we kind of have a blast from the past. Hey, here's 3 articles from the archives that are helpful. And so I would encourage you to kind of subscribe to those things. In 2021, we're planning on starting a podcast, and we're looking at we've got a partner that we're going to be partnering with on that, and bringing in content experts and interviewing different vice presidents of enrollment and marketing on their success, how they've weathered the storm, and just making that content available so that everyone can kind of iron sharpens iron. And so we want to create a podcast that will be something that people can walk away and do something with on a my goal is to give everybody 1 or 2 things that they can do today to make a difference on their website. So today, if you heard anything, I would say if you can clarify your message, if you can personalize some things, if you can answer the questions people are having and get some emotion into your website, go replace a couple photos on your website this afternoon, and I would be thrilled that made a difference in what you're doing. So those are some ways that I would love to connect with people, and I do offer a free consultation. If somebody has some questions and they want to just chat a little bit more, they can reach out to me in my email, and we can schedule a Zoom call and just chat for a little bit. So
that's amazing. Best advice. I mean, I think I want a consultation. I feel like I want to chat with you more. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm going to do a plug for Unibuddy. Please grab us a spot on that podcast. We'd love to get on an episode and talk about all the amazing success stories that we've seen from our customers and
definitely do that.
Innovative ways they've been able to reach students with Unibuddy. Thank you so much. Thanks again for everyone that joined, all the amazing questions. Thank you, Troy, Ryan, Jacqueline, Lasana from Botswana. And we'll see you soon again on the next Fireside Chat. Thanks, Bart.
Great. Thanks, Maria.